I'm not Uberman. I don't like lavender, nor am I especially fond of Cher. I'm not very good at arranging flowers, and I have no eye for color and design. But nevertheless, I am a gay man. To be sure, though, I'm not especially fond of the label gay either. I believe labels can be oppressive. They all too often serve to neatly pigeonhole us into stereotypes. That is, when we label ourselves, not only do we present a black and white portrait of ourselves to others, but we also restrict the way we look at ourselves. With regard to sexual orientation, we all have preconceived notions of what it means to be gay, or to be straight for that matter. Personally, I refuse to define myself by my sexuality. I am much more than a person who just happens to love a person of the same sex. I'd rather be defined by my values and belief systems than to be defined by something over which I have absolutely no control. In any case, heterosexual people don't go around waving flags to proclaim their straightness, so why must I wave a flag to proclaim my gayness? There seems to be a tacit expectation within the gay community that we must all be out and proud if we're ever to attain equality. I understand this, but the expectation of constant activism is a heavy load to pile on someone who may already be burdened by the dread of some new oppression or the fear of being whacked upside the head. Most of us just want to be left to live our lives in peace. That is not to say that I'm not active or that I'm not an activist. Yes, I admit it, I have waved a flag or two. But recently I've made a conscious choice to be active on my own terms, and life is a little easier now, but it wasn't always so. As a pre-adolescent young kid in the Bay Area, I don't think I had an understanding of being different in any significant way. I had three brothers, and, for the most part, we seemed to share a lot of the same interests when we were young. We all roughhoused and wrestled and watched cowboy and Indian movies on Sunday mornings. And we all played baseball, Little League, and were huge fans of the Oakland A's. Where I differed, I suppose, was in my attention to the statistical minutiae of the pitchers' ERAs and the pinch hitters' RBIs, whereas my brothers seemed to be simply interested in whether the A's had won or lost. Rather than recognizing that I might be a little light in the loafers, my dad would tell everyone I was the intellectual one, a label he could live with. In any case, at that time, I really don't think I expressed anything that was so profoundly gay that my dad would have felt compelled to lock me in the basement, or send me to aversion therapy where I might have been electroshocked while watching scenes from A Chorus Line. And perhaps I'm in the minority among other gay men who say they always knew they were different, but I don't remember knowing anything about who I was pre-puberty relative to my sexual orientation. However, even though my family didn't dwell on issues of sexuality at the dinner table, I had certainly learned that being a sissy was not good and that feminine qualities were really, really bad in a boy. I had gotten that message. I had witnessed boys being teased and beat up on the playground, and I knew that being called a faggot was one of the worst, if not the worst thing you could call another boy. There were no bully-free zones back then, nor were there campaigns or programs aimed at educating the teachers and administrators, let alone the students, about the injustices of bullying and that it was not okay to beat up boys who impersonated Judy Garland and sang show tunes in the boys' bathroom. Hell, if Little Billy sang show tunes in the boys' bathroom, Little Billy deserved to get his ass kicked. Making matters worse was the school's probable response. Rather than severely disciplining the ass kickers, they were more likely to send a note home to Little Billy's parents, advising them of his disruptive nature and imploring them to counsel Little Billy against further gender inappropriate outbursts, or else he'd be in danger of another ass kicking. While both bullying and hateful ignorance may still be common in many parts of the country, we are going through a cultural shift that is markedly different than the world in which I grew up. When I was a young boy in elementary school, I can't claim that I was directly mistreated because I don't think I was perceived to be gay. I had no desire to dress like a princess or play with dolls, not that there's anything wrong with that. Nor was I singled out in high school, although I had certainly begun to understand that I was different. I knew that I felt no attraction to girls. I guess I never really got over the idea that girls had cooties. And I had these weird feelings around other guys. Not all guys, mind you, just one or two in particular. I'm not sure that I knew for certain that I was gay, but I definitely knew that I had to suppress any gay tendencies I might be feeling. I grew up in an era of open hostility with regard to homosexuality. Faggots were routinely attacked and abused, physically, verbally, and psychologically. I therefore hid any feelings I had, burying them deep within. Looking back, I now understand that I was experiencing a form of what I now understand to be internalized oppression. I truly believed I harbored some defect. Men weren't supposed to be attracted to other men. Men were supposed to be heroic and stalwart and unemotional. They were supposed to be trying to bag the babes at every opportunity. Other than this, high school for me was in many ways normal. In the end, I made it through high school unscathed by my growing feelings of attraction to boys, and I participated in and enjoyed most of the activities the other kids enjoyed, save for the sex with girls part. While I was still in high school, I decided I wanted to be a pilot, a fighter pilot in the Navy specifically. I wanted to fly an F-14 Tomcat, which was the newest and coolest fighter jet deployed by the US Navy. My desire was based on mechanics, of wanting to control an amazing piece of technological machinery. I was fascinated by the engineering effort that went into building a fighter jet. I suppose the image of the heroic fighter pilot influenced my ambition too. A fighter pilot is an appropriate man job. It's a profession that's still 97% male. And perhaps that image allowed me to solidify in my own mind that I really wasn't gay. I can't really say. In any case, I applied for an NROTC scholarship as a Marine option, which I was granted. And I applied to and was granted admission to UC Berkeley, where there was an active NROTC program. I looked forward to starting my military and college careers, unaware that the military and I might not actually be such a good fit for each other. To be sure, I knew that gay men weren't allowed in the military. I had been asked specifically, as part of the interview process for the ROTC scholarship, if I'd ever had sexual relations with another male. I answered honestly that I hadn't. I hadn't been asked about sexual desire, only sexual acts. However, in spite of my awareness that the military considered gays to be some sort of national threat, and that obedience and discipline were basic requirements, I don't think I quite understood how hugely important the image of masculinity was, that in order to be considered a model Marine, I had to personally exhibit an extreme, over-the-top male persona. In short, I didn't understand just how oppressively and rigidly masculine the military would be. So in addition to the obvious military interdictions against anything remotely gay, there were, and still are, extra expectations of uber maleness piled on top. This exaggerated sense of maleness that was part of the military was finally pushing me to question some core assumptions about who I was and what kind of life I wanted to live. This conflict was exacerbated by the relatively liberal attitude that prevailed at UC Berkeley. Gay men and lesbians were beginning to come out in larger numbers, braving the backlash from a society that believed gays should stay hidden in their closets. Although I was still on track to pursue my military career at Cal, I began to hang out and socialize with other gay students whose openness and honesty about who they were was infectious. Even so, I really don't think I spent a lot of time dwelling on the prohibition of gays in the military. The subject hadn't been brought up since my initial interview for the ROTC scholarship. So amidst all the studying and working and marching in formation and copious beer drinking at Laval's on the north side, I also began to frequent some of the new gay dance clubs that were popping up everywhere. Not too far from campus, on Lake Merritt in Oakland, There was a dance club that was favored by many gay students at Berkeley, the Bench and Bar. It was pretty popular. I'd often go there, waiting with friends in the long line to get in on Friday and Saturday evenings. And although I didn't discuss these excursions with my fellow ROTC midshipmen, I really didn't do anything to hide the fact that I was stomping the nights away to the heavy disco beat of Sylvester and Donna Summer. I'd wait in line openly, like everyone else, embracing the notion that there is safety in numbers, unaware that I, the big me, would indeed be singled out. Late in my junior year at Berkeley, I was summoned to a meeting in Callaghan Hall, the Navy ROTC building. In my blind naivete, I thought perhaps I was being singled out for some sort of positive recognition. After all, I was a good student and had maintained my superstar status by exceeding all the manly physical requirements necessary to maintain that rating. In short, I was a model Marine. However, positive recognition was not on the table. Instead, I was told, in effect, to pack my bags. A model Marine, as it turns out, should not be seen and photographed standing in line waiting to get into a gay club. I was given exactly 1 day to return everything that the military had loaned to me, and I was summarily discharged. I was devastated. Although I had begun to slowly open up about who I was to the non-military world, I had maintained, or so I thought, the illusion of uber maleness with my fellow midshipmen. But I had been discovered. I had committed the sin of simply existing. I lost my scholarship, including a living stipend, which meant I couldn't pay for school or a place to live. I could no longer afford to attend Berkeley. In any case, there was no way I was going to hang around. I was humiliated and terrified that I might bump into any one of my fellow midshipmen on campus. I was convinced they were all aware of my shame. I left school the next day and never went back, failing my spring quarter classes. I did not graduate, and, needless to say, I did not become a fighter pilot and win the heart of a hot chick pilot groupie. My dad questioned me endlessly, wondering what could have possibly possessed me to quit ROTC. "What kind of idiot are you," he asked, "to pass up a golden opportunity?" To this day, I've never told him what happened. Why was I so ashamed? And why do I still feel some amount of shame, while I know, dispassionately, that I should not? To this day, I can't completely shake the idea that my discharge was, somehow, my fault, not the unjust act of a military and of a society that openly discriminates against gay people. Such is the nature of internalized oppression. Life hasn't been all bad, though. Although I lacked a degree, I eventually got a decent job as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, and when I was 23, I met the guy who would eventually become my legal spouse. We were married in 2008, in the small window in which it was legal for same-sex couples to marry in California. My dad attended our wedding. He proudly displays a wedding picture of my partner and me on his mantle beside the wedding photos of my siblings. And then when Proposition 8 passed, and same-sex marriage was legally retracted in the state, my dad and my partner and I together watched as the bigots wildly cheered for joy on the evening news. His eyes clouding with tears, my dad said to me, "If all those idiots knew you like I know you, they never would have voted for that stupid proposition." I cried too, but my tears were happy. I finally realized that my dad truly loves and accepts me for the person I am. I think he always did.